All right. Do we have a card song? You got it.
Yep.
All right. You getting mridangam?
Yeah.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Vinamine. Come closer.
Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale.
There you go.
Srimad Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Ram, It was very tough to keep up with you, Mataji. You've got such a beautiful voice.
Oh, you did wonderful. Thank
No,
you
no,
so much. What a
really
blissful
was singing
kirtan coming
yes.
together. Even virtually, it's been so blissful.
So I can't really sit on the floor.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
I'll
bring
bring
this
it.
over. Okay, Govinda Dasi is ready.
Yes.
Old age has gotten me.
Yeah.
So, should I use that one or this one?
You can use.
Oh,
This
I
one.
don't know how to use this.
You just talk.
Hare Krishna devotees.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances.
I know, Lord. Today we're very fortunate to have Govinda Mataji as our speaker. She is one of the most earliest disciples of Srila Prabhupada, joined in Iskcon in the very early days, second temple in San Francisco in 1966. And she's been serving Prabhupada continuously since then. And she and her husband opened a very nice temple in Hawaii, which I haven't been to yet, but still going on, and is very doing very nice preaching to this day. And we thank you very much for coming and giving us your association and enlighten us with all the different leelas that you have with Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope that I will be able to give some glimpse of what things were like in those very sweet early days with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada often said, oh yes, those were very special times. There were no burdens of management. There was just a handful of disciples. There were no books. There was only the 3 Bhagavatams that he brought from India. Anyway, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Vitala Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachari Devashesha Sunyavadi Paschatya. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his glorious mission. So Srila Prabhupada often talked about the future. He would tell us about how the time will come when there must be chanting in every town and village. And try to understand that in 1967, how inconceivable that was, since we were only about 12 disciples sitting around his room in New York, because we were also in New York. And in San Francisco, things were kind of crazy in San Francisco. We didn't stay there very long, just the first couple of months, because we were college students and we were hippies and we didn't really fit in very well. So we went to New York and we were with Brahmananda, Gargamuni, Rupanuga, all of the early, very early disciples. And Prabhupada told us so many things about the future. And it was inconceivable to us at that time that there would be kirtan parties spread all over the world. It was inconceivable. And of course, there were no books other than those 3 Bhagavatams, those 3 initials that Prabhupada brought with him from India. And at the time, Satsarup was typing Srimad Bhagavatam, and I was typing Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, transcribing, that is. So these early days were very sweet because we got to spend a lot of time with Srila Prabhupada. We got to see his daily routine of offering. He would take a shower and make his offering to his, and there were no deities yet either. There was just, Jagannath was just installed at that time. So we were very fortunate to get to be around him and experience those early days. And I think most of the old devotees, like Achyutananda is still around. He's in Alachua. Rupanuga is still there. He's in Alachua. And most of the very early disciples, if they haven't gone on to the next life, to Krishna Loka, are still there. So I guess what I wanted to do today was talk about some of the predictions that Srila Prabhupada made for the future. I also would like to answer any questions. Usually I would give programs in Alachua a few years ago before I had this accident, where people would just ask questions like, for example, what was his favorite food? Or what was Srila Prabhupada's favorite flower? Silly little things like that might be silly to some people, but to some people they're not. And so I wanted to give that opportunity for devotees to ask questions so that I can get an idea of the audience, because here I am sitting in this house with just this computer screen, and I know Ramenya, but I don't know anybody, so I'm kind of at a disadvantage. And so if I could get some feedback from different people, maybe they could ask, like, whatever's important to you. I don't want to tell you what's important to me. I want to tell you what's important to you. So is that possible? Have there been any devotees who?
So devotees, you can post your questions on the chat, or you can just openly ask the question to Mataji.
Is everybody's microphone on?
No, I mean, unless they have a question, they can mute.
I thank Anjali for leading the kirtan. Anjali is helping me. I have a surgery this Friday, and she is taking me to the hospital, and hopefully not the morgue, but we're going to the hospital on Friday. And she has been a great support to me since my accident a few years ago. She took care of me, so I want to appreciate her for her and her beautiful singing voice. She sings kirtan very nicely. She goes to many festivals and sings at Hare Krishna at festivals. So are there any questions?
Govinda Dasi has been my fairy godmother ever since I met her. I call her my fairy godmother because she encouraged me to sing when I didn't really have anyone in my life to, and that's what I really wanted to do with my life. So that's why she gave me wings.
Okay.
So far,
thank you, Govinda.
questions. So, devotees, if you have any questions, you can. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. This is Shubhalas Govindas. I can ask a question. Thank you so much, first of all, for giving us this opportunity. And although you have surgery in 2 days, but you are so eager to share the nectar with us, and then you couldn't hold that and giving us this chance just before your surgery. And I'm very, very positive that Krishna will give us more of these opportunities for many, many years and decades to come. So if you could please tell us about, this is a question by one of the devotees, if you could tell us about how the Tulsi Devi, we have read some of your articles about Tulsi Devi and how you really love Tulsi Devi and how you take excellent care of her. So if you could, maybe the part one of the question is that how Tulsi Maharani came to US the first time and what was Prabhupada's reaction. And the next part to it is that how can we, as aspiring Vaishnavas, take proper care of Tulsi Devi? So, thank you.
Well, here in Florida, you shouldn't have a problem taking care of Tulsi Devi, that's for sure. You've got lots of sunshine and lots of rain, and she likes both of those things. So far as Tulsi Devi, from the very beginning in 1967, I had some fascination, maybe it was past life, I don't know, that I really wanted Tulsi beads. I don't know if you know, but the early days, we didn't have much contact with India in those days. The actual first time I think that the Indians were able to enter was 71. And before that, there was very little contact with India. So we never saw what, other than Prabhupada's beads, we didn't know anything about Tulsi. But I would often, you know, in the very early times, I would make his bed in the morning because he would be out on walk, and I would clean his room while he was away. And his beads were sometimes in his bed, and so I would carefully put them back in the bag, and they were golden, glossy, gorgeous beads with just totally dripping with bhakti. And so I was fascinated by this Tulsi plant. Plus, I heard the story. In fact, I illustrated in early Back to Godhead the story of Haridas Thakur and the prostitute that was hired to create problems. And I actually did a drawing for that story. It was in a very early Back to God, and I'm sure you can find it. So I had some fascination for Tulsi Devi from the beginning, and I desperately wanted Tulsi beads. So Govinda and I went all over New York at the time because we had these big red beads. Did you ever see them? In early pictures, they look like they're about this big. They were bright, shiny red, and that's what we were initiated with. And I mean, they were so heavy, you could probably knock somebody out with your bead bag. They were really heavy. I mean, I'm sure if you look at some of the early pictures, you'll see, yes, Mukunda is wearing them. That's all we had. So I had this brilliant desire for Tulsi. So we found an Indian shop in New York. That was rare. There were not Indian shops around, but somehow we found one Indian shop, and he sold us these beads that he assured us were Tulsi. So we brought them to Prabhupada and said, look, we've got Tulsi beads. Could you chant on them? And he took them and said, not Tulsi. They were rosewood, hard, dark brown. You know those brown, dark brown beads? They're stained a very dark color, and they have little carvings on them. They were clearly not Tulsi. So he chanted on them, and they were better than the great big red things. And they were easy to chant on. But I still had this desire even later. So then we went to Hawaii. We traveled with Prabhupada from 67, and then he came back from India. We were in New York when he had his heart attack. And then we took care of him at New Jersey Seashore. And then he went to India to get well. He went back to Vrindavan. And when he came back, that's when we started staying with him again and traveling with him for over a year. And so during that time, I still, you know, when I would pick up his tulsi beads and make his bed, I was like still thinking like this. So then time went on and he sent us to Hawaii to open temples in 1969, January. And then he came and lived with us for a month in Hawaii in 1969. Still, there were no temples. It was still very low key. I was typing Chaitanya Charitamrita and Nectar of Devotion. We didn't really have any books yet. And so it just so happened that there was a British lady in Honolulu that had a little Indian shop. She went to India every year. And so I begged her to bring me some tulsi seeds. And I also was going to I was spending a lot of time over at the East-West Center in Honolulu, which is an amazing library. It had books by Srila Bhakti Vinod, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. It had Garuda Purana. It had all kinds of books in the stacks. And in those days, you could go back in the stacks and you could read this book, read that book. And there was one called Firminger's Gardening in India, which was a British book. And it had a description of tulsi. Because see, before that, we're so ignorant, we didn't know, I mean, we wouldn't know tulsi from a plumeria tree. We didn't know what tulsi looked like. We only knew about the beads. So this book gave just what I needed, the botanical name. Ocimum sanctum. Ocimum basilicum is basil, and Ocimum sanctum is tulsi. So it gave the directions on how to grow them, just what I wanted. So then the lady brought me some seeds back, but unfortunately they weren't viable. But we were bowing down every day to these blades of grass that were coming up. We thought they were tulsi. So we were worshiping some blades of grass, you know, like silly young Americans. And anyway, so, you know, the blades of grass turned out to be blades of grass. So then the lady went back to India, and this time she brought me some seeds that were viable. And the first little heart-shaped seedlings, you know, they're heart-shaped, the first seedlings came. And we were overjoyed. And so we wrote Srila Prabhupada, and he was so happy. He was so happy at that time. And then they grew. And when they were about this high, about 6 or 7 inches high, it so happened there was a big Rath Yatra on the mainland. And I brought 2 plants to him. And I went to his room in Los Angeles, and I presented the 2 plants, and he said, "Ah, yes, tulsi." And he was happier than he'd ever been. It so happened, of course, I didn't know about it because we were off in Hawaii, which is like Timbuktu, almost no communication in those days. So there was some heavy Iskcon politics going on at that time I knew nothing about. And he had been very, very upset for days. His servant, Kartikeya at the time, told me that he had not seen Prabhupada smile or laugh for weeks because of this political upheaval that was going on. It was in the early 70s. And, but he talked for about half an hour. He talked about the story of Tulsi Devi. And Kartikeya said, "I've never seen him so happy." So he was very happy. And then he told me to write a book about it. And I did, and to send seeds to all the temples. And that's how the whole thing started. And now there's places like, I know Vancouver has a greenhouse, and they have gigantic Tulsi plants. And it gets very cold there in Canada, you know. And even Russia has Tulsi plants now. But so that's kind of the story of how it happened. I didn't really know, to be honest with you, I did not really know the significance until I read it in the Bhagavatam, when he mentions it, that he's very grateful to me for bringing. I'm going, why did you, like, you know, because I'm nothing special about me. I'm just an ordinary jiva struggling. but he was pleased because it meant that he could institute deity worship. Because without Tulsi, how can you do deity worship? The Lord refuses to eat anything unless there's a Tulsi leaf on the plate, right? So, of course, you Indian folks, you all know, you've all got Tulsi in your backyard. You all know this is like common to you. But try to understand that to us, we had no connection with India in those days. It was a whole new world. In fact, the whole thing is a whole new world. Although I think a lot of us must have been in India because we had so much attraction to these things. Anyway, I hope that's a good enough answer. But is there some other question?
Yeah, I have one.
Question. Okay.
You shared with me that
What?
you were on a plane one day before you met Srila Prabhupada, and you came across a pamphlet that had the name Govinda.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell that story?
She knows about these things. I was in college before I met Srila Prabhupada. I was actually a senior at the University of Texas in Austin, Texas, because I was raised there in Texas. And I happened to be reading a book called Siddhartha. It was a popular book back in the 60s, late 60s, by Hermann Hesse. I never read the whole rest of the book, but I read the first chapter, and it talked about how Siddhartha's best friend was named Govinda. And I liked the sound of that name. I was sitting there I still remember, it was kind of like the window, you've heard of the windows of perception open. It's almost like you tap into a different dimension. I was sitting in the airplane waiting to take off, and I could see the red sunset in the distance and the university tower. It was like all of a sudden I was saying, Govinda, Govinda, Govinda. And it's just, I liked the sound of it. And then, of course, I went back into my ignorance, and, before, this was a year or so before I met Prabhupada. And then when he named me Govinda Dasi, I was like, wow, he knew. How did he know? How did he know that I liked that name? Because I didn't. And see, usually Prabhupada would name a person using the first syllables of their name. That was common. If your name was Robert, it would be Rupanuga. If your name was Alex, it would be Ananda or whatever. My name was Bonnie. There was not much connection with the name Govinda, other than I think I had really desired that name. And it is my favorite name of Krishna, basically. So, anything else?
Thank you so much. One devotee has asked one question, and I request devotees to either you have the option to unmute or raise a hand, or type a direct message to me or type in the chat, whatever way you feel best. All ways are good. But one devotee who has asked this question. So the question is, Mataji, what kept you going in Krishna consciousness when Srila Prabhupada left? There were a lot of challenges and a lot of devotees leaving. So what kept you going when Srila Prabhupada left this planet to connect back to the Supreme Lord? And the follow-up question is that what's the... Am I audible?
Yeah, Prabhu.
I just didn't hear a couple of the words he said.
Yeah.
What kept things going?
What kept you going? What kept you motivated in the path of bhakti when Srila Prabhupada winded up his pastimes in this planet to join his spiritual master in Goloka, Vrindavan? And what instruction of Srila Prabhupada struck you the most in your personal life? What instruction? So it's like a two-part question. Yeah, Karthik Prabhu, can you please?
All of it, everything, all of it, everything wonderful about Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, try to understand, he's actually the emissary for this age. He's the emissary to help us go through the dark times that we are facing now and that we're going to be facing in the future. He's the one who has been sent to spread Lord Chaitanya's movement all over the world. He was given this what you call jurisdiction, you might say. And I think because I was with him so much, and by the way, I was into meditation and yoga of my own self-style. It must have been past life. Before I met him, I was doing meditation every day and was already following the principles. So I had a lot of, I guess the best way to put it is mystical experiences with when I was with Srila Prabhupada. I don't know how to put it any other way. A lot of that has been lost because in the course of things getting really big, which is necessary in order to spread the movement, a lot of those very esoteric things are kind of lost in the mix. But I had many experiences with Srila Prabhupada that were very, very otherworldly. When we stayed with him for 3 weeks in New Jersey, that was the beginning of, although I was already initiated and I already had been with him for 3 or 4 months, those times where he was talking about Vrindavan and about Krishna, it was like riveting. You would be hearing him and it was like you entered into a dimension of Sat, Chit, and Ananda, eternity, wisdom, and bliss. And then when he finished talking about Krishna, you would just go, oh, where am I? You know, it was really like another dimension. And I think a lot of later devotees didn't really get that opportunity. But that doesn't mean it's not available. It's still available to everyone if they tap into it through his books, through the chanting, through actually remembering and talking about Srila Prabhupada is a wonderful way to stay connected. It really is. I mean, I could not go a day without hearing Srila Prabhupada or thinking of him or talking about him or writing about him. And I think that that's one thing that has kept me very connected, although I've been through ups and downs just like every other person, taking care of my mother for 13 years. You know, I also traveled to India. Really, every year I travel to India for many, and you know, Indian culture is just so beautiful and so deep that I think being connected to the whole culture helps also. It really does. And Srila Prabhupada was so, I would say, concerned, maybe preferential even, to his Indian devotees because he wanted to save India. He even said that. I came to America because of my spiritual master's order, but now I'm taking you to India because I want to rescue India. Something like that. You can look that one up. So I think that that's probably been a great help, my being so connected to Indian culture, because I've traveled India from Kanyakumari to Gomukh. I mean, all the way up to Gomukh, from Chardham to Jagannath Puri. I was in Jagannath Puri with Srila Prabhupada, and except Dwarka. I haven't been to Dwarka, and I won't go to Dwarka after reading something I recently read because I am Brijvasi. I don't want to go to Dwarka. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think it's really important right now at this time in history to understand some things about what we're going through in this world. And I don't know how much people know about this. And that's why I think it's important to share it. Because you see, in the very early times, 67, 68, I was with him all of 68, part of 69, Srila Prabhupada used to talk. I took dictation every day for about 3 hours in his room. In those days, we had a manual typewriter. I typed all his letters and his books on a manual typewriter. As a matter of fact, I just cleared out my house because I'm selling it in Hawaii, and I found that very typewriter and just donated it to the Honolulu Temple because that typewriter is Prabhupada's typewriter. And so I think it's important for people, for the devotees especially, to know what's happening in the world today, according to Srila Prabhupada's predictions, according to what he told us. And in the very early times, he used to be very freely talk about the future. He used to say things like, there will be no food in your cities. I was a 20-year-old girl, you don't forget these things. The pet dogs will run in packs and eat the people because there will be no food in your cities in the future. Your oil civilization is in the final phase. He would say things like you're fanking, he called banking, fanking. Your paper money, it's all cheating, and it will become worthless like toilet paper. And actually, we've seen this happen in post-war Germany, where it took a wheelbarrow full of Deutschmarks to buy a loaf of bread. It's called inflation, and we're just starting out with it 5% right now. So he talked about all of these worldly issues very extensively in the early days. And he quit talking about them in 1969 because after Gorsinder and I went to Hawaii, there was a young man who took over the service that I was doing, the secretarial service. And, I also did the cooking too. And this young man was raised with rah-rah NASA, American boy. And so when Prabhupada said, you can't go to other planets, you can't go to the heavenly planets by spaceship, he didn't believe him, and he left. He left the movement. He left Prabhupada. And I didn't even know up until very recently that Shruti Kirti, who was Prabhupada's servant for about 3 years, who was married to my close friend Kusha, I didn't know, but Prabhupada used to ask Shruti Kirti, you're not going to leave me, are you? Because I say you can't go to the moon by spaceship. So he quit talking. He rather, after that, instead of telling details about the future, he just started saying, get prepared, get self-sufficient, get farms, get spiritual communities on the farms, get cows, grow your own food. The time is coming very soon when you will not be able to have these things in the cities. So all of these things he talked about, toward the end, he talked about this very extensively. And I think what we need to understand is, and a lot of people are living in a lot of fear right now because of the pandemic and the virus and all this stuff that's going on that's destroying the economy of the world, every country practically. This is a part of the purge that has to happen before the golden age. And I think devotees need to be aware of this, that things aren't going to go back the way they were. That's not going to happen. And this may be bad news to some people, because it is to me, because I don't like change any more than anybody does. But in order for the golden age to come into being, there has to be a purging of the planet, because the sinfulness of this planet right now, with the animal killing, with the abortion, with the mass murder that's going on, all these things, it's reached the tipping point where it can't go on. You can't have a civilization indefinitely that is functioning on killing people and wars and murder of animals. It won't work. Sooner or later, the karmic payback's got to come, and this is coming now. And I think Prabhupada talked about this extensively in those days. And I found out that most devotees never heard these things. I only found this out in the last year. I thought everybody knew these things. But now I'm finding out that's not quite true. He talked about the war with China. I just recently saw Amarendra, one of my godbrothers, talked about how that they had a meeting, and I think it was in Detroit or Chicago, and Prabhupada was talking about there will be war with China. And the devotees were really surprised, Amarendra said. He said, well, we thought it was going to be with Russia, but China? And Prabhupada said, they said, is there any way we can avoid it? And Prabhupada thought for a long time. And when he thought, he could look into the future. This is what I think people don't realize, but the Indians realize this. You're familiar with eons of saints and sages and seers who have the capacity to see the future. Most Americans don't understand this. But Prabhupada looked into the future and he said very clearly, no, there's no way to avoid it. So what we see happening right now is the speeding up of the karmas, the karmic payback of the world. And what Prabhupada's instructions were, and he gave us very clear instructions that you need to make communities of like-minded devotees and get out of the cities, get self-sufficient, grow your food, get land, get cows. These were things he talked about repeatedly in the last few years of his life. And unfortunately, due to whatever happened, I don't even know because I wasn't that connected. I was busy doing other things. It hasn't happened. We have very few farms and we have nobody's self-sufficient. And I think that should be the next step in our devotional communities because we have children, we have a legacy to protect. We have Prabhupada's legacy to protect, and we have young children to protect. And we can't, we have to rely on what Srila Prabhupada taught. We can't depend on the so-called information given by the Rakshasas that are controlling the world right now. I mean, even if you look at Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, he says the Rakshasas are in control of the world right now. I can show you pages. I'm sure you've seen them. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that the Rakshasas, I mean, this is not like some faraway philosophical discussion about Rakshasas controlling the world. We're talking about real-time stuff here. We're talking about Rakshasas who really believe that there is no God and that they want to control everyone. And they are able to do it now with the technology that they've developed. And they're moving forward at lightning speed to do this. And we have to consider the future, the children that we're responsible for. We can't throw our families and our legacy to the wolves that are out there wanting to destroy every religion on the face of the earth. It's pretty clear they don't want, because they even explain, you know, they don't want religion. They don't want, what did I just read today? Somebody was saying that their pastor just said, this is a Christian, their pastor just said, from now on, we can't have any more baptisms. Okay. They don't want, when people gather together and have kirtan or worship God in any form, it generates spiritual energy, it generates hope, it generates communion with the spiritual and enthusiasm. We all know, we know what good kirtans are like. And that is the opposite direction of what the demoniac forces want. The demons want to run things their way. On another note, you have to also see that indirectly, everyone is serving Krishna, even the demons. They think they're serving themselves, but with their big plans and their all these things that they're doing to disrupt society, they are also participating in what is a purge. What is the karma for the world? Things are going to change. There's not going to be slaughterhouses in the. How can you have the golden age? How can the golden age come in where it's a sliver of 10,000 years in Kali Yuga? And Lord Chaitanya talked about it, Narad talked about it, Prabhupada talked about it, we all know about it. So how can you have that with slaughterhouses and millions of animals being killed every day? How can you have the golden age with abortions taking place every day? It's not possible. It has to change. And it is changing. It's going to change. And there probably will be a war too, although all the astrologers were saying there'd be a war last February 2020, but the war is a bio war at this point. It's pretty clearly, bioweapons and this virus and the lockdowns and all the stuff that, and I'm sure there'll be more, all these things that are disrupting the world as we know it. So we need to not be depressed about it and not be confused about it. I think what we need to do is listen very carefully to what Prabhupada had to say about these things. We need to look at his instructions. He foresaw all these things. He talked about them in the early days. And he told us what we need to do. And it's up to us to do it. That's basically it. Fortunately, there are farms in India. There are farms in Europe. There's a beautiful farm in Hungary. And there are many devotees, old Prabhupada disciples here and there that have farms that left Iskcon after Prabhupada left and went off and bought land and have farms. There's a lot of that. But we need, especially now we have the Indian community coming together and you all have children and you've come to this country and you've got a good education and you've got good income and you're brilliant tech engineers, most of you. And your parents have sacrificed, many of you, I am very much in touch with your parents' generation, more so than your generation, because I traveled in India so much when your parents were there and you were little kids. And I used to travel and do Indian programs for about 20 years. They used to teach us Indian Sunday school in Houston back in the 80s. And it was an all Indian temple. It wasn't even an Iskcon temple because the Iskcon had great Sunday school, but the Indian temples didn't. And you know what they say about white elephants, they always listen to the white elephants. So most of these kids are now, they're all in medical school or already doctors or whatever. So I'm not so familiar with your generation as I am the older generation, but I know that the older generation, when they came to this country, some of them were working 2 and 3 jobs so that their kids could have the kind of education that you have. And they made great sacrifices. And now we have the sanskars go from birth to birth. You have whole generations of devotees that have maybe hundreds of years. Some of your families go back as Vaishnavas hundreds of years. These are the people that will populate the coming golden age. These are the people that we have to protect. This is our duty, actually. And of course, I'm an old lady. I won't be here much longer, 4 or 5 years, maybe, if I'm lucky. But most of you are younger, in your 30s or 40s. And so I think a really good thing would be to start forming an organization and look at land and look at the possibility of making some kind of, while you're in the position of having good income and things haven't fallen apart so badly yet. You have your good income, you have your youth, get something ready for the children and the children of your children, because that's the future. That's the future of the world. So, any questions?
Thank you so much, Mataji. I think 2 more devotees have questions. So Baswati Mataji and then then Prabhu. So Baswati Mataji, please go ahead, ask your question.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Mataji, I have a question about the book distribution. How did you do the book distribution during Prabhupada time? Because you mentioned that you told that you type the books, and that time the books were also not very available. So how did you manage, Mataji, those days to distribute the books among people, different people in the United States?
Well, it's there wasn't any book distribution because there wasn't any books. It's very simple. That's an easy question to answer. There weren't any books. Prabhupada came with a trunk, $7 from India, or I think 40 rupees or something, equivalent of about $7, and a trunk full of his Srimad Bhagavatam. That's all the books there were in America at that time. And so when I was with him, of course, he was working on the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And I did the cover of the first one, the one that you probably never saw, the lavender one. It was printed by Macmillan. And I did the cover of it. It was, they changed it. Prabhupada wanted a universal form. They changed it to four-handed Vishnu. And then that was the first one. And then he got the rights to print his full Bhagavad Gita as it is. And Jadharani did the cover of that one. He wanted Krishna on the chariot with blowing the conch. So the one that, the original book that you're familiar with, that was not done until 70, that's 70, I guess 72. Yeah, 72. And I joined him in 67. So there wasn't any book distribution. I was typing his, he would do a transcription. He would speak into the dictaphone, and then there's a machine called a transcriber. And I would transcribe his tapes every day. He would do it early in the morning, and then I would get the tapes. And I would sit at the kitchen table with my little manual typewriter, and I transcribed Nectar of Devotion and Chaitanya Charitamrita. Satsarup did, my godbrother Satsarup did Bhagavatam, but I did Chaitanya Charitamrita and Nectar of Devotion. So they weren't printed yet. So there really wasn't any book distribution. In the very early days, there was basically Srila Prabhupada. That's it. And that was enough. That was enough to sustain anybody for a lifetime. And I can speak for my close godbrothers like Achutananda and Rupanuga and Brahmananda and all those who were, the Swami was our world. His room was the world and he was all the people. I wrote a poem like that once. So sorry, no, that I know I once gave a class to some Indian children in Austin, because there's a lot of Indian kids there, wonderful devotees in Austin. And they were asking about the temples then. And I was like, oh, well, sorry, but there weren't any temples then. It was just a simple storefront in Frisco, San Francisco, and a very small storefront in New York. And then there was a bowling alley that had like 3 people living in it up in Montreal. And we lived there for a while, but there was only 5 devotees. Pradyumna, who was later Prabhupada's Sanskritist. It was a different time. I feel very fortunate to be able to have lived at that time and witnessed that. At the same time, I know, I mean, some people say, oh, those were the good old days. But on the other hand, Prabhupada wanted things to spread all over the world. So they may have been the good old days, but they were preparation for the Yuga Dharma. And the Yuga Dharma is the spreading the holy names all over the world. So even though they were the good old days, and yeah, I appreciate them and all that, and I love reading about them. Shyam Sundar's book, Yamuna's book, if you've not read Yamuna's book, please do so. It's beautiful. And Shyam Sundar's book is wonderful. It's more of a guy's book too, because Shyam Sundar's relationship with Prabhupada was like, they were like pirates or something. They would do really far out things, like cowboy boys or something. I don't know how to explain it, but there are these old devotees who have had these wonderful, wonderful times with Prabhupada. And I think it's important that they share them. I mean, my book is not quite out yet because I've been busy taking care of my mother. That was my duty, but it will be out soon. And there's a lot of wonderful connection. If you can make connection with Srila Prabhupada, it will give you the strength to go forward, because Srila Prabhupada is not gone. He has the jurisdiction for this particular time in history, which is this very dark passageway between now and the golden age. He's our escort. Lord Krishna has sent him to escort us, to help the Vaishnavas through this dark time. And it's important that we take advantage of this and you know, grab hold of the coattails, as I always say. So that was the book distribution.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. One more question. He has asked Mataji. So, Prabhupada mentions in some of the purports in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, about women that they're not as intelligent or less trustworthy. So would some people ask Prabhupada also this question, and how would Prabhupada respond to such questions about women and their intelligence? How would he respond? That's a question.
I didn't understand that. Did you?
Yes.
While Karthik Prabhu is communicating, I think if anyone has, like, maybe you can take one last question after this.
Oh,
So,
it would depend on who. Is that what he asked about the women less intelligent?
Yes.
Well, you know, somebody asked me about this recently. There's a story about Jamuna, and she just said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes, actually, I wrote an article. It's in the, there's a book that's just come out not so long ago called Prabhupada's Daughters, A Bond of Love. It's available online, and it's writings by all of Srila Prabhupada's female disciples and what they experienced. The problem is that by nature, women are more attached to family. Queen Kunti is lamenting that I'm so attached to family, please help me. And so that is being attached to the body, or the identification with the body and the identification with others that come from the body, is not considered to be ideal, because the whole thing, as Prabhupada says, the whole show is temporary. The whole show is temporary. But we get caught up in it, all of us, because the Lord's Maya is so strong. I think that this, the issue with the women, there was really no problem in the very early days. I didn't have a problem with it. It's like one time, it's a really funny thing happened with Srila Prabhupada. I was doing drawings for the Prahlad book, and I had to draw these demons that were torturing Prahlad. You know, they had him in a boiling oil, and they were poking at him, and I didn't know what a demon looked like. So I didn't know, how am I going to draw these demons? I've never seen one. So I got some comic books and looked at and picked some horns and tails and pitchforks and whatnot. You know, I did the best I could. And then because he looked at all of our drawings, don't think he didn't know. He looked at every drawing. He looked at every book. He was on it. He was on top of it. So I showed him this, and I said, I don't know how to draw a demon. Do these look okay? And he looked at him and he said, oh yes, these are very good demons. And then he said, yes, there are such demons like this in dark parts of Africa and South America. And like a child, I said, really? I mean, remember, I'm a senior in college, right? I didn't know that. And Prabhupada looked at me very compassionately and said, there are many things you do not know. And I mean, I didn't take offense by there are many things. I mean, hey, it's true. I'm just raised as an ignorant American girl. What do I know about anything? So I think that a lot of this, what you call backlash and stuff, has been more about maybe friction. We didn't have that in the early days. Everyone treated everyone with love. We were like a family. Brahmananda was like my brother. He never put me down. I didn't put him down. We were, or Achitananda, or we were like a family in the very early times. And Prabhupada even later even said that, how sweet those times were, because there was no politics. There was no one-upmanship. There was no enviousness. But how long can that last in the material world? Sooner or later, all that stuff creeps in. It's just the nature of the world. But so far as reporters, sometimes Prabhupada could be quite sarcastic, even a little catty with reporters, you know. But he never treated us disciples, us daughters, we consider ourselves the daughters of Srila Prabhupada. He never treated us in any way that was unkind. That was coming from some of our godbrothers later on, that, you know, had problems, that, you know, all of a sudden they're trying to be a brahmachari and they've only had 10 girlfriends in their life. You know, it was just due to the karmic situation of being raised in a Western culture, really. But we never had those kind of problems. The humility that Queen Kunti exhibits is the ideal mood for all devotees, male or female. That's where we're supposed to be. The only real qualification for bhakti is humility. And if you lack humility, you may have a head full of Sanskrit, but it ain't going to get you very far. So this whole thing about women not, well, I mean, nowadays everyone is born Shudra, so I don't think there's any really big problem. I mean, I think the problem lies in not what Prabhupada taught. The problem lies in the way it's been interpreted or misinterpreted by some of my Western godbrothers. That's probably what the truth is. And I don't think you have that so much in your Indian culture. At least I haven't experienced it. I mean, people know their roles. Their roles are, you know, women are protected, ideally, by, they're protected by their husbands. That doesn't happen anymore. Now they're exploited. In America, especially. It's, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I would encourage you, if you're interested in this topic particularly, to get the book, the Bond of Love. You can buy it on Amazon. I think it's $10 or something. I have it. There's two books that have come out in the last year: The Bond of Love and Prabhupada's Daughters. And I can, if you give me your email, I can send you, you know, I can send you how to get them. And it's mostly by early devotees who are still around. If Prabhupada treated us badly, why would we still be here 60 years later? Ask yourself that, right? I'm still here. Even though Iskcon's gone through the bumps and the humps and all that stuff that it goes through, the politics and the men's are fighting and they're jockeying for power, whatever, but we're still here. Most of the ladies are still here. They were the pujaris. They kept things together. They kept things together. When everything else fell apart, or as Prabhupada used to say, And now such and such is, what do you call it? Lost to business. That was the word he used in his letters. And now such and such Das is now lost to business, meaning chasing Lakshmi, of course. And it was the women who kept things together and made the money and went out on Sankirtan and sacrificed their time. So, you know, that's, both sides did service. And it would be nice if they could get along, but it doesn't always happen. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mataji, for your wonderful answer. So it's almost 8:45.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, all women are known for talking too much, and I admit that I talk too much.
No, but that's the sweet stream of nectar. So we are so blessed to hear that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you. You're all the sons of Bharat Varsha. You have a special birth. Very fortunate. You have the intelligence and the sanskars from your families going back hundreds of generations. You're very fortunate. Don't waste it. Don't waste it. Take it very seriously. Now is the time for taking our spiritual life more seriously, because now is the time when the beginning of the unraveling of Western civilization has just begun in the last year. And it's not going back like it was. There will be more unraveling, whether it'll be war or another pandemic or I don't know what's going to happen, because I'm not in charge. But all of these things are simply coming about to make way for the golden age. And ultimately, Krishna is in control. He's in charge. Even though it looks like the demons, oh, this Bill Gates is doing this, or this guy is doing this, or this Trump, or this Biden, or I don't know, there's a lot of them out there. You know, they're all doing their thing. Really and truly, they're just doing what they're programmed to do. But the ultimate program is coming from Krishna. And the devas are running things because they're running things under Krishna. And so when the astrologers say these things are happening, they can see them in the stars, the patterns. And it even says there's one amazing young Vaishnav astrologer named Abhigya. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's about 14 years old. He's a brilliant Sanskritist. He can read the Sanskrit Shastras right off. Wears the Vaishnav Gaudiya tilak, has a young boy, considered kind of a prodigy. And he said, this is a very bad time for the Yavanas. And we're Yavanas, you know. So we have to realize how serious it is. Take very serious shelter of Krishna. Tap into the generations of Krishna Bhakti that exist in all of your families. And that's all we can do, because Krishna is running things. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mataji, for your nectar. So I'm sure more devotees would have questions, but we would like you to hold on to those questions until tomorrow, so Mataji can take proper rest, and you can always ask your questions tomorrow at the same time at 7:30 Eastern. So I request everyone to please connect tomorrow as well, and every day actually, because that's what Mataji said, so that we can take the process more sincerely and with seriousness. So please bless us so that we can all, as your children, take this process more seriously and sincerely and serve Srila Prabhupada and his mission. So we would like to express deep gratitude to you. And I request all the devotees to please turn on your microphones and cameras to express deepest gratitude to Grace Mataji by loudly chanting 3 times.
Hari Bol.
Hari
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Gratitude to Anjali Mataji also for taking care of her and giving and doing kirtans. Thank you so much. And gratitude to Karthik Prabhu for giving us this chance by hosting Govinda Mataji and Anjali Mataji to experience Krishna Katha, Prabhupada Katha and Kirtan. Thank you so much.
Karthik for taking us here.
Devotees, I just want to inform to all of you that if you would like to come in person tomorrow, if anybody is available to come in person tomorrow, I'd like to invite you to come to our place. Maybe I think if you're close by and if you would like to take the association of Mataji, I think that would be more. I think we'll be more fortunate enough that way. So I'd request you to come by if your schedule permits tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll still, have the Zoom call. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Her Grace Govinda Mataji ki jai, Ramya Prabhupada Mataji ki jai, Swami Govinda ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyevacha Kitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.